Hello everyone and welcome to Burnt Toaster Productions. I'm your host, Burnt Toaster. Today's challenge run was recommended by this kind viewer, so thanks, I appreciate it. If it weren't for you, I likely would have eaten a lit candle out of pure frustration while trying to think of a run to do. Anyway, let's get to the rules. I can only use items and equipment that come from standard chests, loot bags that enemies drop, destructible containers, and the few items you can pick up from a couple of spots around the world. More on that later. I'll also be avoiding dig spots and fishing spots unless it is absolutely required for a quest. I'm not allowed to buy anything from traders. This includes customization options such as hair, facial hair, and tattoos. However, if it is something absolutely required for a quest, I'll buy it just to progress the game. This will not stop me from selling items I don't need, although there's not much of a purpose for gold. Demon doors can't be looted. I felt like throwing them in would make the run a bit too easy. Besides, I can just save the idea of only using demon door loot for another day. Magic will be barred from use. I'm only allowed to fall in combat 3 times. If I do fall 3 times, the run will be considered a failure. And that's it for the rules. I've tried recording this run 2 other times. Once was because I messed up, and during the other one I stopped midway through because it felt too easy. Which brings me to the difficulty. For a change, I'll be playing on Heroic. Now, let's get into the run, shall we? For childhood, there's not much to go over, besides the fact that I got as much gold as possible. I'm going to be playing like a miser, so why not amass as much wealth as possible? Anyway, I do some odd jobs around Oakvale and have to buy that box of chocolates for Teresa. I guess if you wanted some roleplay reason for the hero's aversion to buying things or using items given to him, it's due to that fun and definitely not mentally scarring bandit raid. Anyway, with everything burning around me, I get scooped up by Maze and must train to become a hero. Training is fairly uneventful. However, rather than using the stick against the beetles, I decided to only use my fists. The reason being the stick was given to me and not looted, so unless I loot it, I can't use it. After a few years, I have some more training to do. I also now have a bit more control over my appearance, and since I was given clothes, I got rid of them. I hope you enjoy the hero running around with his undergarments out and about. It's a sight you'll have to get used to for a bit. As for training, I go through the tutorial as normal, mostly because the game won't progress otherwise. But when it came to actually applying the things I've learned, I beat Whisper with only my fists. The rest of my training is, well, nothing to talk about. I won't get graded since the instructors will give me free stuff that I have no use for. Some more time passes and I can finally get the final test over with, which involves me being a lazy bum and barely putting in any effort. I still pass regardless. Once I've graduated and have control again, I once again get rid of my clothing and choose the first thing to level up. I decided on toughness, simply because I know it'll be a bit before I'm fully armored. With all of that done, I can set out into the world. The first quest, as usual, is dealing with the wasps. I'll have to punch them to death, which isn't that bad all things considered. Wasps are pretty weak, just have to give them the old 1-2 and they're dealt with. While one unfortunate woman was running away from one of the wasps, I took the opportunity to pick up whatever items I could. Items that are just out there in the world are fair game to take. When all the big bees are dealt with, an even bigger bee swings on by. And yeah, besides the queen spawning one wave after the initial one, this fight was a cakewalk. I did what everyone wishes they could do to wasps. I beat it to death with my bare hands. Afterwards, I went on a slight rampage on the 3 people that cheered for my defeating of the wasp queen. They're just flesh sacks of XP and I need to grow big and strong. Bee extermination being done, I head to Barrowstone to sell my villagers' clothing and weapons, then talk to Maze. Back at the guild, I grabbed a level of physique and health for obvious reasons. My damage is not great and I have no armor. Now it's time to help out with Orchard Farm's problem. The only reason I decided to help rather than attack is I have no use for gold, so there's little motivation to attack the place. But first, I have to get through Greatwood. Speaking of which, I opened my first chest, which contained a piercing augment. Since there are enemies littering the place, I have to forget about fighting them and simply run for my destination. I don't think I have enough health or deal enough damage to get out without perishing. Though that doesn't stop me from grabbing that Willmaster's elixir and a couple of potions before leaving. The thing is, the elixir is utterly useless for this run. Making it to Greatwood Lake, I dealt with a bandit without too many issues. It's just one guy, so the fight is pretty manageable. The rest of the enemies in the immediate vicinity are just wasps, nothing notable really. On to the defense of Orchard Farm. It's nothing too crazy, the bandits are just low-level thugs, and I do have a little backup in the form of a few guards. The boys and I deal with the bandits, then it was up to me to fight Whisper. Once again, I defeated her only using my fists. Since the farm has been saved, I can go back to the guild, get another level of physique and toughness, and also grab a level of accuracy. Not that I can use bows at the moment, but it's a nice little investment. Before heading off to escort a couple of traders through Darkwood, I make a stop by Fisher Creek, only for the leather gloves found in the chest next to the cabin. I run through Greatwood Gorge and pay the bandit toll. This technically could be seen as buying something, but the only other option was getting ripped to shreds by bandits. Also, these are bandits, not traders, so yeah. Anyway, I make my way to the northwestern corner and finally acquire my first real weapon, a steel pickhammer. I feel like I'm one of only a few who will ever actually use this weapon. It's not great, but hey, a weapon is a weapon. With the pickhammer nabbed, I decide to rid the area of the bandit scum. Of course, I still have to be careful, but I'm at least a bit more confident with this thing compared to only relying on my fists. It does decently well, and before I know it, the area is cleared. Now I can grab whatever other goodies they have, which is just money and a flame augment. Man, why can't it ever be something nice? At the Greatwood Colossus Gate, I almost met my demise once, but thanks to my quick enough reaction, I used a potion just before the game considered me no longer living. Make that twice, actually. Moving on to Greatwood Caves, I had the pleasure of dealing with hobs. They were fairly easy to handle, thankfully. Once the area was cleared, I made a little visit back to the guild. I got myself another level of physique and health. Naturally, when I returned to the caves, a troll spawned. Instead of fighting it, I just continued on. I'm not dealing with it right now. I now have the traders I need to escort to Barrow Fields. Rather than telling them to wait, I brought them with me for the Balverine fight, mostly because the mutt won't mess with them much, if at all. After the Balverine gets obliterated, I run face first into the exploding mushrooms since I don't have access to a bow or any magic. When I have successfully cleared the way and am at the region exit, I tell them to wait and go about this the way I typically do. In Darkwood Lake, I grab another piece of armor, a pair of leather boots. Man, I really want pants now. But enough about pants. The only other loot I got around here was mostly gold, besides maybe a few healing items. Anyway, I lead my charges through once the lake is cleared and make it to the camp, where I found a health potion and a steel axe. The axe is a slight upgrade to the pickhammer, just not much of one. I take a bit of time to stop at the Chapel of Scorn and find an assassin shirt. Continuing on, I clear the path of any lurking nasties and open another chest which contains a lightning augment. A bit later, it's time to fight the Earth Troll. It's far from a difficult fight, it's mostly just dodging at the last second and wailing on it with the axe. I'm doing pretty good damage, which means it won't take very long to drop this thing. Once the troll has been defeated, we can move on to Barrow Fields, where the quest is finally completed. Since I'm nearby, I stop in Oakvale, grab an oak crossbow from a chest, talk to Maze, find some boots, go back to the guild, level up speed as well as health, and prepare myself for getting into that bandit camp. Assassinating the guards outside the bandit camp is a bit out of the question. I don't have enough accuracy to take them out with one shot unless I aim for the head. And that's easier said than done when the target is moving. Anyway, I clear out the remaining two bandits, wait for the new ones to get into their spots, and make a mad dash for that region exit. While the bandits in the abandoned road are a fair bit challenging, they're nothing I can't manage. I push through, gathering pieces of the bandit outfit until I reach the end. Now, I won't be using the bandit outfit's pieces for any armor, it's just for this one quest to enter into the camp. Even though it could easily be usable because of the rules, I just want to cover my bases and refrained from using it. Moving on, to get into the elite camp, I simply eradicated the bandits in the main camp. That was an incredibly stupid decision considering I have limited healing supplies, but I did it anyway. In the elite camp, I took some time to loot the surrounding area and I finally found some freaking pants. And here I thought I'd be running around in my skivvies for half the game. To progress, I simply freed the hostages. I wanted to test out the great mace I found near some tent. I figured I'd test it out just a bit more, and yeah, I decided to put it away. I hate heavy weapons, but if I find one that's a lot better than my axe, I'll actually consider using it. Time for the fight with Twinblade. As usual, it's far from hard or challenging. He's an easy boss, just like the Wasp Queen. It doesn't take too long to get him to yield and for Teresa to make an appearance. Of course, she's cryptic and provides me with a nice boost of XP, then leaves me to make a decision. Well, I do need all the XP I can get, but before I end Twinblade, I get rid of the bandits around us. I also make sure to loot absolutely everything I can before I finish this job. When Twinblade has met his demise, I go back to the guild and level up a bit, getting a level of physique, toughness, 3 levels of speed, and 1 more level of toughness. After all that, I go talk to Mace to get some info about the favor he's left for me, which is just finding the Archeologist. Finding the Archeologist isn't that hard, I just have to make my way through Witchwood. Coming across the rock troll, I realized I was doing horrible damage, and honestly, I just wanted to get through this run, so I ran to the next area, which is where I found an obsidian great hammer. Still not a fan of how slow this thing is, but it may balance out with some decent damage, and maybe a slight increase to range. Since I'm in the right spot, all I have to do is hit these 4 stones in the correct order, and I'll open the demon door. With the Archeologist found and not so grateful, I can loot the place. Inside, I found a pair of chainmail leggings, which is an alright upgrade. I still want some better armor. But I did find a pair of chainmail gauntlets in a chest off to the northeastern corner of the map. Alright, time to help Knothole Glade with their little dog problem. Honestly, Balverines are a big reason why I don't like heavy weapons. They're quite the speedy fellows that can and will combo me to death if I don't take some time to block. Which makes me hate using the hammer, but it'll get me through the enemies quicker. After dealing with the normal little guys, I have to fight off the white Balverine. And now I hate using heavy weapons 10 times more. Regardless, I fight off the angry white pooch and go to see the one person who's the most experienced with the beasts. She gives me a silver augment, but there's a problem. I can't use it unless I've looted it, so no silver for me. Once I've thwarted the white Balverine for a 3rd frickin' time, I can finally hunt the thing down. It's not far away, thankfully, and even without a silver augment, it's not too tough to deal with. That is until it calls in several lackeys to help out. Being surrounded by a bunch of quick enemies whilst using a slow weapon is not the most enjoyable experience. But they're fairly weak, so once the white Balverine is down, the rest follow suit. With the big boy dead, I can return to the chief with its head and be allowed to enter the arena. Speaking of which, I immediately go to the arena. Might as well get it out of the way since it can and will likely be a pain. As anyone can imagine, the first round is a piece of cake. Angry bees are no match for a giant hammer, or really anything now that I think about it. Round 2 was also pretty easy, although the later waves were providing some level of resistance, but I eradicated those little gremlins without too many issues. All I had to do was take care of any magic users and the rest would fall like dominoes. Round 3 is where things didn't go so well. Balverines, as you all should know, are quick, and the only decent weapon I have at this particular time is a big slow hammer. The first couple of waves were manageable though, nothing to really write home about. However, the waves that followed were where things started to pick up. That is entirely due to the introduction of white Balverines. The first wave with a white Balverine wasn't awful. I had some hiccups here and there, but Whisper actually took most of the aggro at a certain point. When 2 of them are thrown into the mix, that's where I really started to struggle. I may have decent damage and improved reach, but I'm slow and mobility is practically a highly valued commodity when my stock of healing supplies is limited. Seemed like they were working in tandem with one another because as soon as I would begin any sort of offense, one of the creatures would lunge. The only way I managed to win was by pinning one of the white Balverines against a wall and attacking their back while it was turned to me. Honestly, I feel like I got pretty lucky with that one as I couldn't replicate it with the last white Balverine. Of course, in the usual fashion, Whisper took the kill from me. I'll remember this. Round 4 was pretty manageable. The undead aren't exactly tough and even this hammer has more mobility than they do. Though that's probably because I bought a few levels of speed. Even with that said, they're still capable of laying down some hurt if you're not extra careful. This is precisely why I hate heavy weapons in Fable or any game to be honest. Anyway, once the bony boys are dealt with, it's time to move on to round 5, which means bandits. The first couple of waves are practically a joke. They may get some shots off with their crossbows, but they don't have the defense to back it up. The later waves do though, and I get torn to ribbons. They have speed, defense, and offense. Even with it looking rather bleak, I still managed to get through the round. I did eventually put the hammer up because, like I said, I prefer mobility over pure damage. I just wish my backup weapon was a bit stronger. Round 6 comes around and it's time to fight the Earth Trolls. It's not too bad even with the axe. It helps that both Whisper and myself stayed out of range of the other one, meaning focusing one down was a lot easier. After the first one falls, it's just a matter of time for the second one to meet the same fate. Before you know it, round 7 comes around. Dealing with 2 rock trolls isn't fun. I was getting jostled around like a jar of jelly beans and I didn't appreciate it. My pitiful damage output wasn't helping things at all. At some point, I ran out of food and/or potions. Thankfully for me, after I switched weapons, Whisper kept the other one distracted while I fought. Once that one was done, it was a pretty easy fight to win. Now, the final and 8th round. Archeologist is by no stretch a difficult boss. Really easy to read and all that. Though that may lull some into a false sense of security. As long as I remain cautious but active in offense, I'll be fine. I just have to keep moving, dodge, and smack this thing with my hammer. Unsurprisingly, a big hammer works wonders against a giant scorpion. And then it's time for the actual final round, which is against Whisper. I genuinely was planning to leave her alive, as I have no use for money, but after she took my white Balverine kill, I was properly peeved and needed to vent my frustrations. So I ended Whisper right here in the arena. After all that wonderful combat, I get a message that Teresa wants to see me. She then explains that our mother is in Bargate and I must find the archaeologist to figure out a way inside. Well, there's no time like the present. I'm not too worried about the minions this time around, and that's because of my hammer. Although it's a blessing and a curse. This hammer doesn't do a bad job against the mechanical fiends, but it is still slow, and using a slow swinging weapon against anything speedier than a troll isn't the greatest idea. Of course, it also doesn't help that they have a 4-hit combo along with that speed. But I did find an ebony longbow in a chest. That'll surely help me out. Regardless, fighting my way through the minions was a bit of slow work and not very healthy, as I was constantly using some form of healing supplies when in a melee confrontation. So I took the opportunity to try out my new bow, and it feels a bit underwhelming at the moment. Then again, I haven't really leveled up accuracy, so there's not much I can do about its lackluster performance. Besides maybe slapping some augments on, but I want to save as many of those as possible for any better weapon I may run across. Moving on through, the rock troll didn't stand much of a chance, and that's because it's slower than molasses. The rest of the minions in the area weren't a huge threat either. Now comes the fun part, the time trial that is saving the archaeologist. Since there is no point in standing around fighting every minion on the way to the dock, I make a beeline for it and simply have to wait for everyone to gather around to really get to work. With such a large number of enemies around me, I don't have to lock on. I can just flourish and swing like a madman to get the job done. That is until there are only a couple left. I can go back to playing normally. Once all the minions have been defeated, the archaeologist points me to Litchfield Graveyard. Before heading off and going through there, I do the Traitor Massacre quest. I figured it'd be a relatively easy way to get some more XP and some extra supplies, as I want to be more prepared. To say it didn't go as smoothly as I originally envisioned is a bit of an understatement. I was pelted with crossbow bolts like there was no tomorrow. And yeah, it wasn't necessarily difficult, but still moderately painful. I did survive and complete the quest, but I was left wondering if I really got much of a net positive out of it. Probably not. But oh well. And one last bit of preparation, I wanted to get a better chest piece. Thankfully, I know where to get one. I just have to wait until it's dark at Point Lookout, activate the statue, and go behind the Bowerstone Tavern. There is a chest with a leather chest piece waiting for me. I only learned about that after I attempted to get every achievement in Fable in a single save. With the armor now nabbed, it's time to go through Litchfield. As is basically tradition, I end the Gravekeeper, take the helmet, and go find Nostro. I just have to gather his armor, sword, and shield. Due to a fishing spot and a dig spot housing 2 of the required items, I get to fishing and digging. When I've gathered all of Nostro's belongings, I can make my way through the demon door. I had nothing but problems while trying to defeat the big guy at the end of the path. That's likely due to the other undead slicing me up like I'm about to be put into a Subway sandwich. Despite that, I take the big guy out and can get to the Circle of the Dead. All I have to do here is destroy more of them, which isn't a huge issue. They're pretty easy to deal with when they're not popping out of the ground like angered mole creatures. After that bit of fighting, the way to Bargate is unlocked and I can go on through to find my mother. The way to Bargate isn't super eventful. I make it to the area where you're locked in a circular room with the undead. Except I'm not stuck in there with them, they're stuck with me. After defeating them, I found a health potion and an apple pie in a side passage, then ran for the hills. Which is almost entirely due to the nymph that was chasing me down. In the cliffside path, I had the pleasure of fighting more bony boys. The only thing that I'll say that I absolutely hate about them is the fact that they can toss me around like a frickin' hacky sack. And when you're kind of stuck using a heavy weapon, it'll likely happen a decent bit. I did find the dark chainmail helmet to really complete my armor set. I'll be honest, I look like I fell into an armorsmith's storage building and came out like this. Thankfully, the trek through undead territory is over and I've finally entered Bargate. The only thing is, I basically traded one annoying group of enemies for another. Guards tend to be more annoying than bandits because they're typically tougher, and down here they have a pretty nice numbers advantage. The guards also love using their crossbows, so yeah, it wasn't exactly a cakewalk. That is until I found a decent light weapon in a chest. I've never been so happy to see an obsidian katana. Don't get me wrong, the hammer has its uses, but I'm more of a DPS enjoyer. Putting that aside, I find my mother and can get to work on breaking her out. Of course, that means fighting more guards and hoping I don't use all of my healing supplies since I've never recuperated from the arena. Naturally, we get caught making our grand escape and that means I get to bust out of prison myself. I'm not going to type out anything for this section leading up to the escape, because I'm tired of editing through it and trying to find some new way to describe what's happening. Call me lazy, but playing through a game for the umpteenth time has a way of doing that. Once I have the key, I can grab my gear and fight my way back to my mother. But before that, I looted a stick and found a pair of plate boots. Really completes that I scrounged around for whatever I could use look. Fashion aside, I reach my mother and free her. With her freed, I can begin to get out of here. The guards are still annoying just to a lesser degree now that I've got some actual mobility. However, they're not the most notable enemy in this quest. That'd be the Kraken. Even though that's the case, the Kraken is still a pretty easy boss. It surprisingly didn't do all that much damage to me, even though I could never avoid its beam attack. Of course, its simplicity doesn't help it at all. Before you know it, the giant sea monster is dead and I can finally get out of Bargate. Once we're out, my mother grants me some more power and gives me my next objective. I have to go to the ancient Cullis Gate in Darkwood to get to Hook Coast. Making my way to Darkwood through Barrow Fields, I get ready to fight the undead some more. I was a little worried about the damage I'd be dealing, since the heroic difficulty has tougher enemy variants all over the place. It took a nice chunk of time to fill the gate with the souls it hungered for, but I eventually did it. Once I'm in Hook Coast, my mother tells me to look for a ruined abbey as it's important for unlocking the Sword of Aeons. Currently, I can't access the place since there's a barrier in the way. Returning back to the guild, my mother is forcibly taken by Jack's minions, so I grab a fancy magical book and give it to the guildmaster, then head off to Hook Coast again. When the barrier is dispelled, I'll have the fun task of fighting Maze. This was a fight I was a little worried about. Maze has access to two powerful spells that aren't enjoyable to deal with. The first one is Physical Shield. It's more of an annoyance than anything, but all I have to do is wait for it to go away. The other spell, which is the one I was terrified of, is Inflame. If I get hit by it, it'll take a decent bit of my health. I'm also a bit low on healing supplies as I decided against grinding great wood for loot. In retrospect, I should have just done it, but oh well, hindsight's 20/20. The scariest part was the lighthouse. That's because I'm in an enclosed space with Maze and Inflame has a pretty high chance of hitting me. Plus there's a chance that the camera angle won't play nice. Thankfully I survived long enough to put him down. Now all I have to do is stop Jack. And that entails following Jack all across Albion only to be too late to actually stop him. Which means going to the Chamber of Fate after he's charred the guild. So, let's get into this fight. I'm going to say I was horrendously underprepared for this fight. I didn't have a lot of food or potions and I was half dead by the point that I reached the guild. Before I could fight the man-demon thing himself, I had to fight a wave of minions. I don't know why, but I was struggling pretty hard with them. Once they were defeated, it's time to engage in a melee confrontation with Jack. I would like to say I thoroughly trounced him, but that would be a lie. Instead, I was the one getting a mud hole stomped into them. I had terrible timing with flourishes, which would end with me kissing the stone beneath me. And as soon as I'd get back up, Jack would unleash another attack, dealing some decent damage to me. When I finally activated his second phase, my health was dangerously low and I had absolutely nothing left in terms of healing supplies. My bow wasn't dealing great damage either, but I did get him down to roughly a quarter or fifth of his health. The thing is, when I did, the minions spawned in. Since I had to run from the minions hellbent on taking me out, I was preparing to take a pop shot at him. However, I stood too close to one of the little pillars and ended up dead from the splash damage of Jack's attack. On the second attempt, things were quite a bit more rough. I was fighting Jack in a melee engagement and he utterly stun-locked me with a continuous flow of follow-up attacks. I've never seen him be that aggressive before. I can't even be mad at it. All I have to say is, well played, sir. That was practically flawless. During my third and final attempt, things didn't get much better for me. The minions were cutting me up like a wood chipper and caused me to use most of my food and potions. After a couple of unfortunate hits from Jack, I was at critically low health. I still made it to his second phase, and I wasn't going to give up quite so easily. So in spite of my dire situation, I was willing to keep going as long as I could. And yeah, after a bit of time, I died due to splash damage once again from a spell, meaning I have failed the run. Looking back, it probably would have been a good idea to grind a few regions to better prepare for the final fight of the base game. Something else that would have helped out are those elixirs of life, but I wanted to avoid using them since I didn't want it to be too easy to begin with. There's a reason I decided to restart this run halfway through the previous one. It seems I underestimated the difficulties I'd have, which is on me for getting a bit of an ego and biting off more than I can chew. Let this run be a lesson to you. Never underestimate anything. It'll come back to bite you. Anyway, if you all made it this far, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, especially if you want to see more runs like this in the future. This has been Burnt Toaster from Burnt Toaster Productions, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.